Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Word of the Day podcast, where useful words are pleasantly explained. I'm Jamie Silva. Today's episode comes to you, as always, pre-recorded from the RAV4 studios, and we've got another great word to share today, Loll. And no, this has nothing to do with the popular acronym LOL, as in laughing out loud, which is, I believe, pronounced lol if, rather ironically, you wanted to say laughing out loud out loud. Loll with that extra L on the end, the kind of lol that we're talking about, is a verb, and it means to laze about, to be indolent or idle. Loll nearly always appears in the phrases loll around and loll about, just like how people would say hang around or hang about. And the thing about lolling is that you're not just inactive, I don't think. This carries the connotation that you're physically standing or hanging around, present, but crucially unhelpful. Now, this does feel a little speculative on my part, so let's see what the internet definition says. Quote, to sit, lie, or stand in a lazy or relaxed way. Unquote. Well, this is interesting. So, we sort of disagree on whether the emphasis should be on your laziness or like your physical position or posture. The official definition focuses on your posture, and my definition says, first and foremost, you, the person, are relaxed or lazy or unproductive, and this state is then reflected in your slouchy or relaxed position. And the difference between the two definitions is important, and I believe mine is broader and more accurate, and it certainly reflects the common usage better. While theoretically you can loll about on the couch just because you're tired and not necessarily because you don't want to tidy up, most of the time when loll is used, the key idea is that someone's not being industrious. They aren't chipping in. They aren't trying to get things done. They may well express this idleness by draping themselves on a sofa or leaning up against a fence post, but the idleness is the primary focus, and you don't even have to be specific about whether they're sitting or standing or lying and how they're doing so in order to use the word lolling. So their behavior is much more important, I would say, than their position, even if their position of standing or lying or whatever is mentioned. To go a little further out on a limb here, I'm pretty sure that loll is related to the word lollygagging, which means to either dawdle or to waste time. So you might say that someone who is sent to bring in the trash bins from the road 15 minutes ago must be lollygagging. Otherwise, they'd be back already. Lollygagging has nothing to do with whether you're sitting or standing or whatever, but it does contain this same idea of being unindustrious. Let's hit some examples of loll in ordinary conversation, which go as follows. Example number 1. It was 3:30 p.m. at the office, and Mark was fatigued. After lolling around the break room for a few minutes, he decided to call it quits and leave early. Example number 2. It is a beautiful spring day outside, said Mrs. Matthews. You kids should get out there and have some real fun, instead of lolling around in front of the television. When I was your age, I also lolled about in front of the television on beautiful spring days, but I had way fewer channels, so I guess what I'm really saying here is I'm a little jealous. Example number 3. Let's see here, said Elizabeth. On Thursday, we'll have to present to the class a thorough analysis of the implications of the Battle of Waterloo for the global political order, and all we have right now is a whiteboard with a picture of Napoleon taped to it. It seems to me this group project will never get off the ground unless Marty and George stop lolling about in their beanbag chairs and actually contribute for a change. Hearing this, Marty and George stopped talking and shifted uncomfortably in their beanbag chairs. Okay, that is it for today's word, but we do have time for another edition of Gratuitous Observations About Things, in which I reflect or opine on whatever suits my fancy, whether you ask to hear what I think about it or not. And this is one of our favorite segments, and today's observation is about the versatility of the word economics, which can be tacked onto any president's economic policies to apparently become its own portmanteau. Portmanteau just being a word that combines two other words, such as brunch from breakfast and lunch, or chortle, which is a combination of chuckle and snort. Basically, if you're a president and your last name could conceivably be mashed together with economics, it will be. And this is where we get the likes of Reaganomics, Obamonomics, most recently, of course, Trumponomics. Anyone using these words gets to sound well-informed and folksy at the same time, because you're both referencing economics, which is something knowledgeable people like to do, and you're using a catchy, fun-to-say word to do it. everyone wins, except perhaps the field of economics, because if you've got a smart-sounding portmanteau to lean on, you no longer need to know much about the actual ideas involved. Everyone just assumes you do because you're using the right word. Like if you said, "I'm not partial to Reaganomics," people will either nod or skeptically raise an eyebrow depending on their opinion on the subject, but they more or less get what you're saying, and they won't ask you to elaborate. If, on the other hand, you say, "I have some misgivings about President Eisenhower's economic policy legacy," well, no one's quite sure what that refers to, so you'll probably have to explain yourself, which is scary. Now, if any of you listen, as I do, to the great podcast Freakonomics, or have read the books associated therewith, you know that this practice of sticking onomics on things extends well past precedents. In this vein, I would like to propose some new fields of study within the economics profession, or perhaps new names for existing fields. First, there is the study of the costs and benefits of networking with other business people, going to industry conferences, chatting it up, rubbing shoulders with and otherwise hobnobbing with fellow professionals. And hobnob, I should say, technically means to mix socially, especially with people of higher social status than you. So this field of economics, I believe, should be known as hobnobonomics. One might also wish to investigate the competitive environment in the market for memory-building techniques, which are commonly known as mnemonics, and this would be mnemonicnomics. And lastly, there's the study of food, specifically snacks, and even more specifically, extremely tasty and munchable snacks, and this is omnomnomonomics. And there are probably more, and if you think of any, you can email us at wotdpodcast@gmail.com or tweet them at us. We are on Twitter at WOTD_podcast. Okay, that is really and truly it for today's show. Thank you for listening, but no thanks to producer Pete today. We were really hoping that he could use his master's degree in hippopotamonomics to help us out with some research for the gratuitous observation, but sadly he's just been lolling about the studio doing nothing while the rest of us prepared this episode. Anyway, as some of you may know, one of the fundamentals of podcastonomics is that your show does better if you have more reviews on iTunes. So if you happen to just be lolling around with nothing to do, perhaps do mosey on over there and let the people know what you think. This has been the Word of the Day podcast. I'm Jamie Silva, and we'll see you next time.